When the helicopter careened into a California hillside on the morning of January 26, 2020, killing Kobe Bryant and the 8 others on board, the initial response around the world was shock. Then, it was, how? How did this seemingly routine trip to a youth basketball game end in tragedy? How did the helicopter that Bryant used for years suddenly crash? How could this possibly have happened? At 8:39 on the morning of the crash, pilot Ara Zobayan sent a text message to the small group of people coordinating Bryant's trip, including his drivers, concierge and a representative from the helicopter company. Heli at OC, Zobayan wrote. Standing by. 30 minutes later, the helicopter was in the air, traveling from John Wayne Orange County Airport to Camarillo, California, where the passengers would then be driven to a youth basketball game in nearby Thousand Oaks. Bryant was joined on the flight by his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, John and Carrie Altobelli and their daughter, Alyssa, Sarah Chester and her daughter, Peyton, and Christina Mauser, an assistant coach. The helicopter flew north for about 15 minutes before slowing down and circling near Glendale to make way for air traffic at a nearby airport. Then it followed a highway into the hills near Calabasas, flying between 400 feet and 600 feet above the ground. You just going to stay down low at that for all the way to Camarillo? An air traffic controller asked Zobayan. Yes sir, the pilot replied. Low altitude. Minutes later, there was a shift change at the Southern California Tracken, which provides air traffic control services to airports in the region. And the helicopter was heading into increasingly mountainous terrain, where visibility that morning was poor. When the new air traffic controller contacted Zobayan, the pilot said he was climbing above the clouds, to 4,000 feet. Instead, the helicopter got no more than 1,600 feet above the ground before banking left and descending rapidly, crashing into the hills. That combination of the low-lying stratus layer, and also the relatively high rising terrain, it's a common and, really, a deadly combination, said Jack Kress, a former helicopter pilot in the U.S. Marine Corps who is now an instructor in the Aviation Safety and Security Program at the University of Southern California. Bryant regularly traveled by helicopter during and after his NBA career, in part to avoid the oft-gridlocked traffic in Los Angeles. And he regularly chartered flights with Island Express helicopters, including 13 trips in 2019. In fact, the helicopter involved in the crash, a Sikorsky S-76B, was the same machine that transported Bryant to his final game with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2016. Kress said the Sikorsky S-76 is generally well regarded among pilots and has a strong safety record over decades of use. He noted that it has been the helicopter of choice for Queen Elizabeth II, among other top dignitaries, since 2009. They just don't fall out of the sky, pilot Kurt Dietz, who previously flew Bryant in the same helicopter, told CNN last year. The NTSB has examined the helicopter itself as part of its investigation, including both maintenance records and physical evidence obtained at the crash scene. It said in a preliminary report last year that the engines had been found near the wreckage and showed no evidence of an uncontained or catastrophic internal failure. I haven't seen anything in the data that I've looked at that would suggest that there was anything physically wrong with the helicopter that would cause an accident, said Brickhouse, who reviewed the NTSB's public docket of the crash. The helicopter did, however, lack 2 notable components. It did not have a flight recorder, colloquially known as a black box, that could have provided additional data for investigators. Nor did it have a terrain awareness and warning system, known as TAWS, which notifies pilots when they get dangerously close to the ground. The weather was also a topic of conversation among Bryant's travel coordinating team prior to takeoff. Zobayan, the pilot, fielded inquiries about it via text message the night before the flight and the morning of. Should be okay, he replied. Pilots typically fly under visual flight rules, where they can see where they're going, or instrument flight rules, where they primarily rely on the aircraft's instruments because their vision is obscured. But the conditions that morning prompted Zobayan to take off under special visual flight rules, a sort of middle ground between the two. The weather that morning has also been at the center of multiple lawsuits filed by Bryant's wife, Vanessa, and the other victims' families against the helicopter company and Zobayan's estate. The families argue that Zobayan should not have flown in adverse conditions, and that Island Express helicopters should have had regulations in place to prevent him from doing so. Investigators have questioned whether Zobayan became spatially disoriented in the fog just before the crash. One NTSB document mentions the possibility that he might have experienced a somatogravic illusion, a phenomenon in which gravitational forces can confuse the body in the absence of visual cues. In other words, Zobayan might have felt like the helicopter was climbing as it banked toward the hillside. "You can get yourself in a bad spot, because your body is lying to you," said Kress, who is also the principal officer at Vortex Helicopter Analytics. "It doesn't know that you're both turned and attempting to climb." Kress also wonders if Zobayan might have felt pressure to complete the flight on time that day, pressure that might have kept him flying through the fog, into hilly terrain, when perhaps he should have turned around. That helicopter pilot Ara Zobayan became disoriented after flying into low clouds over the 101 freeway in Calabasas, and mistakenly flew the Sikorsky S-76 into a hillside while trying to climb above the clouds. The board says, the pilot made a poor decision to fly at excessive airspeed, about 160 miles per hour, into an area of poor visibility. The pilot lost the ability to control the helicopter after losing visual contact with the ground. And the pilot may have had what the NTSB called self-induced pressure to complete the flight, despite the bad visibility, because he wanted to satisfy his client, Kobe Bryant.